discussions there. Well, anyway, somebody posted on there that he had shared with a friend a video I had done, a YouTube of mine, one that I'm particularly pleased with, and it's called the Libertarian Speech I Would Deliver to the Whole Country. And the friend said this: I got to the point where he is fantasizing about markets. Here we go. How without taxes, businesses invest in capital, and workers are happy because now there is more efficiency and wealth for everyone. Yes, absolutely true, indisputably true, yes. Wealth for everyone? Without the cursed government intervention he likes to demonize, there would be no 8-hour workday or minimum wage. Oh, you were doing so well. Before the days of government intervention, these benevolent markets hired children so they could pay them less. Well, of course, this is exactly the line they give you in school. Speaking of school, this person has absorbed the lesson perfectly. No independent thinking at all. The government has made me safer and happier. How do I know? Because they've told me in their schools. Why would I be suspicious of that? That they run a bunch of schools, and by the way, those schools happen to tell me that I couldn't survive without them. I'd be earning 10 cents an hour working in a coal mine somewhere with one arm and one leg. I mean, wouldn't you be a little curious? I mean, how do these institutions sap the curiosity out of everybody? Like, you're not even remotely curious that there might be maybe another way of thinking about this? That you had child labor, and then the government got rid of it, and then you didn't, so that must be the whole story? Let's deal with the child labor thing. I mean, I've covered this. I've covered this in a couple of my books. I cover it in the government course that I do for the Ron Paul Homeschool Program, which I urge you to check out at ronpaulhomeschool.com. You can get my courses for the Ron Paul Homeschool Program just on their own without joining the Ron Paul program over at tomwoodshomeschool.com, by the way. But to make a long story short, you don't have to be a free market economist to note that what's really going on in the child labor situation is that the reason the kids work, and the reason they worked from the beginning of time, by the way, this isn't, she says, your so-called benevolent markets, they made children work. Yeah, you know what made children work? Reality. For thousands of years they had to work because the family was too poor for them not to. Even today, although capitalism is reducing child labor all over the world, as its natural tendency is to do, they're still working for the same reason they always did, which is that the family will starve if they don't. Let's just put it bluntly. The family will starve if they don't, which is why when Oxfam, the British charity, reported on the results of an anti-child labor campaign in Bangladesh, they found that thousands of children had simply gone into prostitution instead or starved. But I know I should be patient with people, and I try to be. Heaven knows I try to be. But it is so deeply irresponsible to have such an uninformed opinion on something like child labor. This person, no doubt, would have supported that campaign. Yeah, we can get rid of child labor by just passing a law against it. Let's just pass a law. If we pass a law against it, the family can't starve. What? That doesn't even make sense. So you go pass your do-gooder law, these kids die or go into prostitution, but you don't even notice because you're on to your next bumper sticker campaign. Because you think about every issue in terms of a one-sentence bumper sticker. Abolish child labor. Well, who doesn't want to do that? But I'd like to do it without the kids dying. How about that? I'd like to do that without them having to prostitute themselves. How about that? Right? I want to abolish child labor too. Abolish it through capitalism. Because what does capitalism do? The point that I made in that video is think about society 250 years ago, let's say. Let's just pick a time at random. Think about, why are people poor in that society? Are they poor because the wicked rich people are unjustly depriving them of material goods? Is that why they're poor? They're poor because they live in a society in which the economy is not physically capable of producing enough goods per capita for everybody to enjoy a satisfactory standard of living. That's why they're poor. Redistribute wealth all you want in the 18th century. You will solve nothing other than to make people even more miserable than before. I mean, the worst, most antisocial, anti-human policy imaginable at that time would have been wealth redistribution. You need that money to invest in capital goods so that more physical stuff can be produced with less input. This creates greater abundance, which puts downward pressure on prices relative to wage rates, and that's how people are able to consume more and to escape grinding poverty. We already talked about this, by the way, the incredible strides against grinding poverty made by the market in our episode with Deirdre McCloskey, episode titled, Why Are We So Rich? Well, this is not a small thing. I mean, you'd think people would be grateful for this, have some kind of respect for the market. But they don't. But anyway, now we can see how it is that capitalism gets rid of child labor. By consistently increasing output and thereby putting downward pressure on prices relative to wage rates, you increase the real incomes of everyone, which means that that family can now get by without sending their kids to work. You know, as I've sometimes said, it's not like all the bad parents in the world are all living in Bangladesh. Like, that would be kind of a weird coincidence, wouldn't it? It's because Bangladesh is so backward economically that they can't produce enough to make it possible for families to keep their kids home and to keep them home year after year after year after year being educated. That's impossible. That is an impossibility unless you want these families to starve. How do you get them not to starve? You pass a law against starvation? Really? I mean, really? Has public school done that to your brain? That's all you can, that's the best you can come up with? We'll basically pass a law against starvation? Because that's the mentality here. You don't pass a law against starvation. You change the circumstances. You fix things so that they don't starve. You create abundance so that they don't starve, so they don't have to send their kids into that environment. And yeah, sure, you'll get a law against child labor. But that law would accomplish nothing unless there were enough abundance for most kids to be able to abstain from working. So the market gets rid of 90% of child labor in the way I just described. That's how it happens everywhere in the world. And then they come along with a law and they get rid of the last bit of it. But notice that nobody was thinking about an anti-child labor law in, the past 3,000 years of human existence, for example. We have no record of that because it never occurred to anyone that it would be possible. It's not that all these people, everybody's been a terrible parent for thousands of years. It's that nobody thought it was possible to solve this problem. The market makes it possible to solve this problem, and people like this blame the market for child labor. They blame the market for child labor. Then she says, and we wouldn't have had the 8-hour day. Are you kidding me? So you're telling me everybody would still be working 12, 14 hours a day if it hadn't been for the government? This innovation was being introduced in the private sector long before government came along, and it's not hard to understand why. When the economy is physically incapable of producing a lot of stuff, people do work extremely long hours. That's the only way they can survive. That's the only way they can survive, is if everybody works incredible hours, then the economy produces barely enough for them to get by. But suppose you now introduce capital goods into the equation, and now my labor can do twice the work it used to. Well, now suddenly, we as laborers in general don't have to work as much to produce the same output. Now we can afford to indulge in some leisure. And so therefore, we begin to opt for leisure over additional income. I'm sure there are plenty of people listening to me right now who, if they wanted to, could find another part-time job and work more. I am absolutely certain of that. You could all find a part-time job and work more. Why don't you do it? You'd get more income. Answer is you are willing to pay a premium for leisure because now that capitalism has helped to meet your basic needs, you don't feel like you need to work 24 hours a day. You can now enjoy your leisure. That's part of the reason you work, is to enjoy leisure. You don't work just so that you can keep working, unless the work itself brings you pleasure. So the 8-hour day will naturally be introduced in the private sector. I mean, these people say, oh, all the private sector cares about is profits. Well, even if that were true, that's why they would introduce the 8-hour day. Hello? That's why they would introduce it. Because if you get to a point where people would rather have leisure, would rather work only 8 hours a day, let's say they want to work 25% less than they used to. Well, if they're willing to pay a premium for leisure, as we all are, right, because you're not out at a part-time job all the time, so the very fact that you are enjoying leisure proves my point, so I don't even need to go beyond that. But if they want to work 25% less and they're willing to pay a premium for the leisure they enjoy, they're willing to earn 30% less when they work 25% less, there's no private sector employer that wouldn't take that deal. And everybody's happier. I get more leisure. Yeah, I pay a little bit for the leisure. But as time goes on and the market economy continues to grow and continues to produce more abundance, I'm not even going to, that premium will also be washed away. My real income will continue to rise, plus I enjoy the leisure. So it's in the interest of the private employer to offer these hours to people who want them. But there are some people who don't want them, who really need to work long hours for whatever reason, and so they ought to be free to make that decision. But these offers will be made because they are in the direct interests of the employers. Well, then she says, and without government intervention, we wouldn't have the minimum wage. All right, well, I think listeners on this show probably understand the minimum wage. But I will briefly say something about this. I mean, the very fact that they have special arrangements in some cases for teenagers or for people with disabilities proves that supporters of the minimum wage know that it destroys jobs. They know that these people would be hurt by it. Like they know that. I mean, obviously, if you were to say, all right, the price of lumber right now is, I don't know what the price of lumber is, $100 for a unit of lumber, let's say. And from now on, it's going to be $130, but that will not affect sales of lumber at all. It'll probably help the economy. Oh, really? Well, then let's just raise the prices of everything, because apparently nothing has any effects, and there are no laws in the economic realm at all. Well, the minimum wage thing, first, at bare minimum, it's not necessary for the reasons I've explained. This is not how wages rise. Wages rise through capital investment, increasing the amount of capital per worker. There is no substitute for that. You can't pass a law getting rid of gravity. You can't pass a law getting rid of scarcity. The market is what has made possible the explosion in material wealth and in the well-being of the average person. It wasn't that we passed some laws 200 years ago that we began to get compound economic growth. I mean, come on now. All right, here's an interesting, I cited this on my blog some time ago at tomwoods.com. Almost all full-time workers, 99.4%, are earning more than the minimum wage. And this person is worried about the minimum wage. And almost all full-time hourly workers, 98.3%, are earning more than the minimum wage. Most importantly, the fact that more than 3 out of 4 teenagers, 77.2%, who are the least skilled and least educated group of workers, earned more than the minimum wage in 2011, would suggest the minimum wage is mostly an entry-level wage for beginning workers with no skills. Hello! The reality of the labor market is that even a large majority of previously unskilled teenage workers are earning more than the minimum wage as soon as they can acquire minimal job skills and work habits and can demonstrate their value to employers. Yes, that's right. As many economists have said, it's the first step on the ladder. Let them take that first step onto that ladder. Of course, we're seeing this in the fast food protests, too. We are worth more, the signs say. Are they? How can they know? If they were worth more, Other firms would have captured their extra worth by bidding them away from the fast food industry and hiring them themselves. Then we can know they were worth more, at least in some other line of production. But since no one else seems willing to hire them at their current wage rate, it seems to me that the very last institutions they should be angry at are the fast food restaurants themselves, which happen to be the only institutions on earth doing anything to improve their standard of living. Why don't they protest at all the places that pay them $0, having refused to hire them at all? Now, no kidding, it's hard to make ends meet when you work in a fast food restaurant. These are entry-level jobs, the classic entry-level jobs. You can either use them for advancement within the restaurant or as evidence to future employers that you are a reliable person. Or you can have zero ambition, make no real effort to improve yourself or acquire a skill, even though your local library or the internet makes it possible for you to train yourself in most anything for free these days, and complain that your only benefactor on earth isn't paying your true value. Yeah, okay, maybe I'm being harsh here, but people who have the mentality that the way for me to advance is to go in the street and scream are never going to be helped unless they're spoken to frankly. That is exactly the wrong attitude, especially in this economy. I have to sit around and demand that people give me what I'm worth. You go out and show what you're worth. That's what you have to do in this economy, sitting around waiting for somebody to hire me at a wage I consider acceptable. You're already doing it wrong. Articles that have been written in support of the strikers have been saying that the restaurants could increase the workers' pay if they would just raise the prices of their food. But this gives the whole game away. It shows the real constraint on these workers' pay, as this argument inadvertently reveals, is erected by the consumers. So the logic here is we can help some poor people by hurting other poor people. And incidentally, if you want to help poor people, why not just go ahead and do it? Why go the absurdly circuitous route of trying to make food more expensive, which in turn hurts other poor people? Why not just seek out the working poor directly and help them? And why castigate the only institution in society that has lifted a finger to improve their material condition? And the answer is, these people are all talk. They'd love to help everyone in the world as long as someone else pays the price. These critics pay McDonald's employees $0, but they're upset at McDonald's, which gives them a paycheck. Now, I don't care about the merits of fast food or it's bad food or whatever. That is entirely beside the point. And it is interesting, by the way, to track growth in the minimum wage over the decades against black youth unemployment. It is shocking. It's one-to-one. It's a perfect correlation. It is as revealing as you could ask for, and yet we're supposed to believe this is a progressive thing. I mean, come on now. Again, come on. Have an original thought for once in your life. Now, look, you guys who listen to me a lot, I don't generally get worked up on the show, but it's just so tiring that you cover the same ground, and then you get what you get in response to what are obviously pretty well thought out arguments is stuff like this. I mean, utterly conventional nothingness that collapses at first glance. I mean, all you have to do is just think about it, and it collapses. But we're taught not to think. Look for the answers in the book. The book tells you the minimum wage has helped these people, when the minimum wage is almost completely irrelevant to the U.S. economy. It's not the minimum wage that has helped people. It's capitalism. It's capital accumulation. It's not a law against gravity that has allowed us to fly. It was the innovation that led to aviation. Forget about passing laws when it comes to stuff like this. It is only with the wealth the market economy makes possible that any of these luxuries, which would have been considered unbelievable luxuries at any other time in history and any other place in the world, are possible. And it seems to me we ought to be grateful for this instead of, I don't know, ill-mannered ingrates, pretty much. All right, I was going to answer a question. Somebody wanted to know, what on earth is going on in the Catholic Church these days with Pope Francis and all his crazy appointments and stuff. I think I'm going to do that. I'll do that in another Q&A episode one of these days down the road. And I'm not sure a lot of you guys are interested in that or not, but I suppose if you're not, you can just fast forward over that part. But I do have some knowledge on this, having written for a number of Catholic publications, and I've followed this somewhat closely, so I could weigh in on that, but instead I'm going to let you guys run and say thanks for following me this past year. We're going to try and make the show even better in the coming year. Keep on going. I hope you can help spread the word about the show, TomWoodsRadio.com. You guys are the best advertisers I have. And also, I have set up something for you guys in a way to thank you for the support. If you go to supportinglisteners.com, you're going to find just an unbelievable array of things. You know, you send $250 to PBS, and they send you a crummy umbrella. No. You're getting at least as much as you give with the stuff that I have for you over at supportinglisteners.com. All my Ron Paul homeschool courses, which are suitable for adults, by the way. You should not feel silly taking them. You'll find that I'm treating these students as if they are adults. I'm treating them like they're bright students, which indeed they will be. So I've got that. I've got lifetime subscriptions to my libertyclassroom.com, where you can learn the history and economics they didn't teach you. All kinds of great stuff over at supportinglisteners.com. So if you have enjoyed what I've been doing and appreciate what I've been doing for the past year, I hope you'll take a moment to have a look over there at supportinglisteners.com. All right, thanks so much for listening, everybody. See you tomorrow.
The Tom Woods Show.